Holding my son for the first time should have been a moment of pure joy, the culmination of every struggle, every failed attempt, and every night my wife and I spent clinging to the hope that someday, somehow, we'd finally have a family. I was trying to feel that joy, to focus on him, but something in the room, some heavy, invisible weight, kept me on edge. I looked down at his small, scrunched face, his mouth opening and closing like he was practicing a yawn. He was so light in my arms, so fragile, but something about him felt distant. I forced a smile, brushed a finger across his cheek, and tried to let it sink in that this was real. I was a father. Look at you, he likes you already, my wife murmured, her voice soft but filled with an exhaustion that ran bone deep. She watched me, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite decipher, some complex mix of relief and tenderness. Yeah, I think he does, I said, adjusting him gently. He's beautiful, and he was. But as I stared down at him, the feeling I'd been pushing away began to build, a prickling, hollow sense that something was wrong, that some piece of the puzzle didn't quite fit. I tried to shove it down, dismiss it as paranoia or some leftover anxiety from our years of fertility struggles. But then, he opened his eyes, dark, deep, and unfamiliar, and I felt that pang again. So, what are we going to call him? I asked, trying to focus on anything else. She smiled, a tired but genuine smile. We agreed on James, remember? James Michael. Right, of course, I replied, letting the name roll around in my head. I tried to settle into it, to make myself believe that this name, this moment, would finally cement my role in his life. But it didn't. He doesn't look much like me, does he? Her smile faltered, just slightly, a look of hurt flashing across her face before she shook it off. He's a newborn, of course he doesn't look like you. He'll change 1,000 times in the first few weeks. She forced a laugh. Honestly, all babies look the same right now. Just give it time. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. She wasn't wrong. I'd read enough about newborns to know that genetics were a funny thing and that appearances could change rapidly. But it didn't ease the tension in my chest. Are you okay? She asked softly, reaching out to place her hand on my arm. I felt a rush of shame, realizing she could see the turmoil behind my eyes. This was her moment too, and I should have been here for her, for us. Yeah, I said quickly, putting on a smile. I'm just. It's a lot to take in, you know. All of this. I'm still wrapping my head around it. She nodded, her face softening. I know, it feels surreal, doesn't it? After everything we've been through, he's finally here. Her eyes drifted to James, and a look of pure contentment settled over her face. I can't believe it. There was a silence between us, not the comfortable kind but something brittle. I shifted my weight, handing James back to her. He looks good with you. Natural. I laughed, trying to ease the tension, but it sounded forced even to my ears. Maybe I need a few more tries before I feel like a pro. Hey, she said, her tone gentle but serious. You don't have to be a pro. None of us know what we're doing, not really. We'll figure it out together. The word hung between us like a promise, and I nodded, wanting to believe it. But the question clawed its way back, eating at the edges of my mind. I couldn't shake the sense that there was more here, that something vital was just out of reach. She watched me, her gaze intense. You're not disappointed, right? No, of course not, I replied quickly, perhaps too quickly. It's a lot, you know. I guess it's like you said, he's finally here. She nodded again, slowly, her eyes flickering with a hint of worry before she pressed a gentle kiss to James's forehead. I know. It's a lot to process. But we're here now, all of us. But as I watched her cradle our son, a dark suspicion gnawed at me, tugging harder. I couldn't just shake it off. This was supposed to be our moment, the day I'd finally hold my child and feel whole. Instead, I felt empty, like I was losing something instead of gaining it. When the DNA test kit arrived, it came in an unremarkable brown envelope, tucked into a stack of bills and junk mail. My hands trembled as I brought it inside, the weight of what I was about to do suddenly hitting me. I knew this was a step I couldn't take back, a step that would either confirm my worst fears or make me feel like a terrible husband for even doubting my own son. In the living room, my wife sat on the couch, bouncing James gently on her knee. She looked up as I entered, a soft smile spreading across her face. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her eyes lighting up. "James has been missing his dad." She leaned forward, holding out our son. I took him, feeling that same familiar pang as he looked up at me with wide, unblinking eyes. There was something so vulnerable in them, so trusting, and guilt gnawed at me. He was just a baby, my baby, or at least that's what I desperately wanted to believe. But the doubt was like poison in my veins, and it wasn't going away. "Yeah, I wanted to spend some time with him," I said, forcing a smile. "Thought I'd give you a little break too. You look like you could use some sleep." She sighed, her face softening as she leaned back against the couch. "Sleep would be nice, but I think I've forgotten what that is at this point. Besides, it's worth it." She looked at James with a tenderness that tore at my insides. "Every time I look at him, I just feel complete, you know." I nodded, a heavy silence hanging between us. It was like she could sense something was off, but neither of us dared to address it. I shifted James in my arms, looking down at him, his tiny fists clenched, his mouth forming a little "oh" as he blinked up at me. My heart twisted, the urge to protect him battling with the seed of doubt that had taken root. "Listen, I might need to go out for a bit later," I said, the words stumbling out awkwardly. Her brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just some errands. Nothing major." I forced a smile, hoping it was convincing enough to mask the turmoil inside me. After I handed James back to her, I slipped into the bathroom, the DNA kit clutched tightly in my hands. My mind raced, and I leaned against the sink, gripping the cool edge until my knuckles turned white. It was surreal to be doing this, to be standing here, swabbing the inside of my son's cheek like some criminal investigator on a TV show. I felt dirty, disloyal, but I needed to know. I took the swab, my heart pounding as I looked at it, then gently opened James's tiny mouth and swiped it along his inner cheek. He squirmed a little, letting out a small whimper, and I paused, guilt flooding through me. This wasn't his fault, he was innocent in all of this. "Sorry, buddy," I whispered. "Just bear with me, okay?" I sealed the sample, following the instructions with the precision of someone afraid of making even the slightest error. Every part of this felt wrong, like I was betraying him, betraying her. But the doubt was a silent scream in my head, and I knew that until I had an answer, I'd never find peace. The wait for the results felt like an eternity, every day stretched thin by the anxiety gnawing at me. My wife didn't ask about the errand I'd left to run after taking the sample. In fact, she hardly noticed the way I had started to drift, lost in my thoughts, my attention slipping further away from her and James. One evening, as we sat quietly in the living room, she glanced over at me, her eyes searching. "You've been so distant lately. Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone gentle but laced with concern. I hesitated, avoiding her gaze. "Yeah, I guess I'm still adjusting, you know. Being a dad and all. It's a lot." She gave a small, understanding smile. "I know it's overwhelming. But, you seem more than just tired. It feels like you're somewhere else." For a moment, I wanted to tell her, to spill everything and let her convince me it was just paranoia, that I was being irrational. But the words stuck in my throat, caught in a tangle of fear and suspicion. "I'll be okay," I said finally, my voice hollow. "I just need a little time." The email notification came late one night, just a few lines on my phone screen, simple and unassuming. But as I opened the message, a cold wave of dread washed over me, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "Non-paternity detected." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. I read the line over and over, hoping it would change, that somehow, I was misinterpreting it. But there was no mistaking it. James wasn't mine. I stumbled into the bathroom, locking the door behind me as I sank down onto the floor, my mind spinning. How could this be? How could she do this to me, to us? Every memory, every moment we'd spent trying to conceive, every painful disappointment, it all felt like a lie. A knock on the door startled me, and her voice floated through, soft and tentative. "You okay in there?" "Yeah," I managed, my voice strangled. "Just, not feeling great." She paused, the silence stretching before she spoke again. "Can I come in?" "No," I said quickly, too quickly. "I just need a minute." I heard her sigh on the other side, the sound tinged with worry. "Okay. I'm here if you need anything." "Yeah," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Thanks." I sat there in the silence after she left, the weight of betrayal settling over me like a lead blanket. My mind raced, replaying every moment, every night we'd clung to each other, desperate for a child. I thought about my father, an image of him creeping into my mind unbidden, his reassuring presence throughout our struggles, always there with a kind word, a supportive smile. My father, the man I'd looked up to my entire life. A sickening realization began to creep in, a connection forming that I hadn't even dared to consider. It felt insane, too horrific to be real. But the thought took root, and I couldn't shake it. My father, and my wife. A knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts, and her voice came through again, softer this time. "Are you sure you're okay?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak. "I'm fine," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "Okay," she hesitated, then added, "You know you can talk to me, right? Whatever's going on, we're in this together." I bit down on the anger bubbling up inside me, my knuckles whitening as I gripped the phone in my hand. "Yeah. Together," I echoed, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. As I sat there, the truth settling over me, I realized that everything had changed. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a betrayal, deep, calculated, and complete. And I wasn't going to let it go unanswered. The hours that followed the revelation felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream where everything was slightly out of focus. My world had been turned upside down, and I was still grappling with the fact that James, my beautiful son, wasn't biologically mine. But beyond that, a darker truth loomed over me, a shadow that deepened my anguish. My wife had betrayed me with my father. That evening, I paced the living room like a caged animal, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't quite articulate. The walls felt too close, the air thick and suffocating. I could hear her in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Each note of her song twisted like a knife, the sweetness of it grating against the raw pain I was feeling. Finally, I couldn't take it any longer. I stormed into the kitchen, the anger bubbling to the surface, threatening to overflow. "We need to talk." She looked up, startled, the knife in her hand pausing mid-chop. "What's wrong? You look intense." "Intense?" I scoffed, anger spilling over. "Is that what you call it? I found out something today that changes everything, and you're just standing there chopping vegetables like it's another day." Her brow furrowed, confusion etched across her face. "What do you mean? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me." I snapped, my voice rising. "You know exactly what I mean. James isn't mine. He's not my son." The kitchen went silent, the air thick with tension. She stared at me, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. "What? How could you know that?" "I took a DNA test," I said coldly, each word dripping with accusation. "And it confirmed what I suspected. But that's not all I know about you and my father." Her face drained of color, and she dropped the knife onto the cutting board with a clatter. "You don't understand. It's not what you think." "What do I think? That you've been lying to me? That you let me raise a child that isn't even mine while you were sleeping with my father?" My chest tightened, anger and betrayal spiraling together until I felt dizzy. How long did this go on? Was it during all those months we spent trying to conceive? "It wasn't like that," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake, one night when everything fell apart. You have to believe me. It was never supposed to happen, never supposed to happen." I echoed, incredulous. "And yet, here we are. You think this is all just a mistake. You think I can just overlook this because you didn't plan for it. She stepped closer, desperation written all over her face. Please, just listen to me. I was lost and scared, and I thought I'd never be able to give you a child. When your father, he was there for me when you weren't. I thought he understood. It was a moment of weakness. Your moment of weakness destroyed everything, I shot back, my fists clenching at my sides. You destroyed me. You took the one thing I wanted more than anything and made it a lie. You made me a fool. No, please, she said, tears streaming down her face. I love you. I love you and James. I never meant for this to happen. It was one night, and I regretted it the second it happened. You have to believe me. I don't know what to believe anymore, I hissed, my heart pounding in my chest. You want me to believe that this was some sort of accidental slip-up? That I'm supposed to forgive you and forget? This isn't just about me, it's about our son. What kind of father would I be if I just accept this betrayal? Please, let's talk this out, she begged, her voice breaking. We can figure this out. I never wanted to hurt you, figure it out. I sneered. What's left to figure out? You've already made your choices. You want me to just sit here and pretend everything is okay? Pretend that we're still a family? The hurt in her eyes twisted the knife deeper, but I was past the point of caring. The anger had a life of its own now, and I couldn't just ignore the betrayal. I need you to leave, I said, the words emerging from somewhere deep inside, cold and final. I can't even look at you right now. Her eyes widened, disbelief mingling with desperation. You can't be serious. You can't just throw away everything we've built together. We can work through this, I promise. I'm done working through things, I said, shaking my head. You've broken my trust. You've shattered everything I thought we had. You need to go. Where will I go? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the tears now falling freely. Not my problem, I replied, my voice hard. You made your bed. Now lie in it. As she stood there, frozen, her face crumpled in pain, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and heartbreak. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to punish her for what she had done. But deep down, I knew that I was the one truly shattered. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, her shoulders shaking, and I heard the door of our bedroom closed softly behind her. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing the finality of what I had just done. I had pushed her away, but the cost was so much greater than I could have anticipated. Alone in the kitchen, the silence settled around me, heavy and suffocating. I felt an overwhelming urge to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I stared at the empty space where she had stood, feeling the walls closing in. I had no idea what came next, but I knew that I couldn't let this go unanswered. I had to reclaim my life, and that meant gathering evidence, finding a way to expose her betrayal to the world. She would face the consequences of her actions, and I wouldn't rest until everyone knew the truth. The next few days blurred together, filled with an unsettling mix of anger, despair, and a burning desire for revenge. I spent hours alone in the house, the silence amplifying my thoughts until they became a chaotic storm. Each corner of our home reminded me of her betrayal, of the life we had built together, and the cracks that now marred it. Determined to reclaim control, I started devising a plan. I needed to gather evidence of her infidelity, something undeniable that would expose her for what she had done. It was no longer just about the broken trust, it was about justice, my justice. I couldn't let her walk away unscathed. I sat at the kitchen table one evening, surrounded by papers and my laptop, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts, and opened a blank document. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, and I whispered to myself, okay, how do I start? As I typed, I began outlining everything I needed to do. First, I would gather my thoughts on what had happened and write down everything I could remember from our conversations. Then, I'd need to find evidence, texts, emails, anything that could incriminate her. I needed to prove that she had betrayed not just me, but the sanctity of our family. The door creaked open behind me, and I turned to see my wife standing in the doorway. She looked worn, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, and my heart twisted at the sight. I quickly masked my emotions, forcing my face into a stony expression. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft and hesitant. "About what?" I replied, the coldness in my tone sharper than I intended. "About us. About everything that's happened. I don't want to just give up." "Give up? You already did that," I shot back, unable to contain the anger bubbling inside. "You think we can just pretend this is some minor issue we can fix? You broke my trust in a way that can't be repaired." Her shoulders slumped, and she stepped further into the room. "I know I messed up. I'm so sorry. But I love you, and I love James. I don't want to lose my family." "You should have thought about that before sleeping with my father," I snapped, feeling my blood boil at the reminder. "You have no idea what you've done to me." "I made a mistake," she pleaded, stepping closer. "One horrible mistake that I regret every single day. But I'm willing to fight for us. Just give me a chance." "Chance?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "What kind of chance? To pretend everything is okay while I walk around with this gut-wrenching doubt? I can't do that." She fell silent, her eyes searching mine for any hint of hope. But all I felt was a gnawing sense of betrayal. I could feel the edges of my resolve hardening, the plan forming in my mind like a dark cloud ready to burst. "I'm not going to make it easy for you," I said finally, my voice low and steady. "You'll have to prove that you're worth fighting for." "Prove?" she echoed, confusion etching her features. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to find evidence," I said, my voice colder now. "I need to know exactly what happened between you and my father. I can't move forward without it." Her face paled, realization dawning on her. "You can't be serious. You'll just hurt yourself more by digging into this. It'll only lead to more pain." "It's already painful," I shot back, and I refuse to live in the dark. "I need the truth, and I will find it. Whether you like it or not." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, she stepped back, her expression a mix of sorrow and fear. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Then you better start thinking of a way to show me that," I replied, dismissing her. "Because I can't just take your word for it anymore." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, then turned to leave the kitchen. As the door clicked shut behind her, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, mixed with a dark satisfaction. The plan was taking shape. I would gather evidence, and then I would confront her again, this time armed with the truth. That night, after she had gone to bed, I stayed up late, scrolling through our text messages and emails, searching for anything that might hint at her affair. I had saved every conversation, every moment we had shared, and now it all felt tainted. Each text felt like a dagger to my heart, a reminder of the life I thought we shared. After an hour of searching, I stumbled upon something, a text from my father that had slipped under my radar before. The message was innocuous on the surface, just casual talk about a game, but it felt like a lead. I opened it and stared at the screen, my heart pounding as I thought about the implications. "Hey, are you coming to the game tonight? I could really use a distraction." Was it a coincidence, or was it the night she had strayed? I knew I had to dig deeper. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. The next morning, I woke early and grabbed my phone. I texted my father, feigning casual interest. "Hey, Dad. You free today? I wanted to catch up about that game last week." His reply came quickly. "Sure, I can do lunch. Want to meet at our usual spot?" Perfect. I had my chance to get him alone, to confront him about what I suspected. I needed answers. Was he really the man I thought he was? Was he capable of betraying me in the most profound way? As I prepared for the meeting, the weight of my emotions pressed down on me. This wasn't just about my wife anymore, it was about the man who had raised me, the one I had trusted implicitly. But I couldn't let that stop me. I needed to uncover the truth, and whatever I found, I was ready to face it. "Dad," I texted one last time, "I need to talk about something important." I took a deep breath, the reality of the confrontation settling in. This was just the beginning. With my plan unfolding, I was determined to expose the truth and make her face the consequences of her actions.